Have you ever noticed that in Disney stories, no one bleeds, no one really cries, and no one plants a tree on their mother's grave? Everything is clean, cute, and musical. But the real Cinderella, the one that got censored, didn't wear a glass slipper. She wore a golden shoe stained with blood. She didn't have a fairy godmother. She had trauma. And her magic didn't come from a wand. It came from unresolved pain. This forgotten version, written by the brothers Grimm, is an initiation tale disguised as a children's story. A deep spiritual journey where the ego is crushed and the soul is tested. Here, awakening doesn't come with glitter. It comes with grief, silence, and choices that hurt. And if you still think spiritual awakening is about going to Bali and drinking ayahuasca, maybe you need to hear this story until the end. In this video, you'll find out why this Cinderella says more about you than you might think. Because deep down, we've all tried to force a shoe that didn't fit. And maybe, just maybe, it's time to stop trying to please and start listening to what's buried beneath your own ashes. You think you know the story of Cinderella? Then tell me what's so enchanting about slicing your toe off to fit into a shoe. The version Disney sold you is sanitized, emotional bleach. In the original Grimm version, there's no fairy godmother, no magic pumpkin, just an orphaned girl burying her mother and planting pain into the ground. And from that pain, a tree grows. Literally. While we grew up thinking being a good girl was enough to be rewarded, Shenpel, Cinderella's original name, had to become ash. A soot-covered creature, a ghost in her own house. Her name wasn't a name, it was a label. A daily reminder of grief and rejection, and all of that, before she even thought of a prince. Her true journey is of a crushed spirit that refuses to break. The irony? Even in that landscape of abandonment and humiliation, the real miracle begins. But don't expect sparkling lights or magic wands. The magic in this story is dirty, silent, and symbolic. It starts with a tree born from grief. This isn't spiritual comfort, it's confrontation. And what comes next will hurt a bit more. Her mother dies and leaves her a legacy no life coach would ever include in an ebook. Remain kind and good. That's it. No visualize and manifest, no gratitude universe. Just raw grief and a grave to visit. And there, between tears and silence, the girl digs. Not just into the earth, but into a strength you won't find in a motivational video. She digs within. Meanwhile, life keeps being generous to cruelty. A new stepmother, awful stepsisters, relentless humiliation. But Shenpel doesn't explode, run, or break down. She endures. Not because she's weak, but because she's transforming. Pain is ripping away childhood fantasies. It's the process the ego hates most. Dying a little inside so someone new can be born. That doesn't fit in toxic positivity speeches. No one wants to hear that sometimes the real spiritual awakening starts when everything goes wrong, when there's nowhere left to run. And there, in the kitchen between lentils and ashes, the soul begins to whisper, "You're still here." But before it can be heard, it'll have to face the ego disguised as beloved sisters. The sisters cut off parts of their own feet to fit into the shoe. Say it with me. They cut their own feet. And no, it's not just a macabre detail. It's a mirror. How many times have you emotionally mutilated yourself to fit into a relationship, a job, or a better version of yourself? Ego wants to belong, even if it means bleeding for it. When ego takes over, even pain seems reasonable. These sisters are ego in its most desperate form, pretty on the outside, rotten on the inside. They want the prince, the palace, the validation, and to get it, they obey a mother who hands them a knife and says, "Cut your toe. You won't need to walk once you're queen." That's the promise of modern illusions. If you bleed enough, you'll be loved. Spoiler, you'll just bleed. Meanwhile, Cinderella doesn't force anything. She doesn't lie, doesn't cut parts of herself. She waits. And that's exactly what pisses off the collective ego. Someone who stays pure even covered in ashes. Because when truth shows up, it doesn't squeeze into the shoe fits it. But before that, there's a tree, a grave, and some mysterious birds waiting. While Disney wants you to wait for a fairy godmother to drop from the sky, Shenpel plants a twig on her mother's grave and waits. The tree that grows isn't magical because it sparkles. It's magical because it was watered with real tears, pain with no Photoshop. That tree is a symbolic altar, not to ask for what you want, but to receive what you need. And when it speaks, it's through a bird. The birds that help Shenpel separate lentils from ashes are small miracles from the unseen. They represent that forgotten part of us that still responds to the sacred, even when everything feels lost. No mantras, no full moon rituals, just connection. Real spirituality is that, when even animals recognize your truth before your family does. Want something practical? Create your own symbolic grave. Plant something. Literally. A seed, a tree, an intention. Visit that space when everything feels chaotic. Pray. Cry. Talk to something greater than yourself, not to be saved, but to remember there's still life under the ashes. Only then do the birds know where to land. But when they do, what will they bring? Forget about that instant karma fluff from social media. In the original tale, justice is poetic, but it's also brutal. The sisters try to latch onto Shenpel's happiness and end up blind, their eyes pecked out by doves. Literally. Every eye gouged is a truth they refused to see. They didn't recognize another's pain. Now they can't see at all. Blindness is the end game for those who live in spiritual lies. This story doesn't end with a happily ever after, but with a disturbing reminder. Awakening has a cost. There's no space for ego or emotional makeup. Cinderella doesn't forgive in the Instagram influencer way. She doesn't seek revenge, but she also doesn't invite her sisters into the palace. Life takes care of justice. She takes care of consciousness. That's spiritual evolution without fireworks. So next time someone talks about manifesting their soulmate, remember what happened to those who tried to shove their foot where it didn't belong. True union happens when you stop chasing approval and start walking with your soul, even if it means dancing alone at the ball, in a golden shoe with a past covered in ash. So tell me, how many times have you cut off pieces of yourself just to fit into someone else's expectations? Have you noticed how many lentils you've sorted from the ashes just trying to be accepted, praised, or chosen? The real Cinderella story isn't about finding love, it's about finding yourself. And sometimes that means digging up old wounds, facing your ghosts, and finally giving up on being rescued. Now the choice is yours. Are you going to keep forcing the shoe or start planting your own tree? Are you going to keep dancing with your ego or finally listen to what your soul has been whispering all along? Because in the end, you either wake up or you go blind from your own lies. If this story stirred something inside you, hit subscribe, turn on the notifications, and share this with someone who still thinks spirituality is just incense and mantras. Here, we talk about truth, about pain, about healing, and how to turn ashes into awareness.